Y'all ever hear about that old boy Ethan? Folks round these parts say he weren't scared of nothing, but when he crossed paths with something darker than the midnight holler, well, let's just say, fear ain't something you laugh at no more. This here's a tale of a man who thought he could outsmart the devil, but ended up calling something much worse. Now, thanks for tuning in to the Scary Stories from Kentucky Podcast playlist right here on the Kentucky Melody YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story from us. Your support helps keep these tales alive. Now, I've got a tale for you that's been whispered around campfires since my childhood, one that's not just for spooking you, but also has a little lesson tucked away in it. So, grab yourself a cozy spot, turn down the lights, and let's dive into this eerie story together. Down in the quiet hills and hollers of eastern Kentucky, amongst the rolling green hills and thick woods, there was this feller named Ethan. Now, Ethan, he weren't like most folks around here, didn't have no use for fear, or so he said. It was like nothing rattled him. Folks even said Ethan weren't scared of a blessed thing. But one day, his buddies decided they'd see just how far his guts went. They was all sitting round a bonfire one night, laughing and carrying on, when one of 'em said, "I bet you ain't man enough to go in that old witch house yonder in the woods." Now, everybody knowed about that house, settin' all by itself, crumbling down and spooky as all get out. They said a witch lived there once, mean as a rattlesnake, and folks who went in never came out again. Well, Ethan, he just laughed it off, like it was nothing more'n a tall tale. Said witches was just old folks foolin', nothing real about 'em. But over the next few days, that house started itchin' at him something fierce. His buddies kept poking fun at him, telling him stories about folks disappearing and vanishing right out of thin air after they stepped foot in that house. Finally, Ethan couldn't stand it no more. Curiosity done sunk its claws into him. He figured if he didn't go, folks'd think he was chicken. So he up and set off for the witch's house one day, determined to prove they was all just a bunch of superstitious fools. Them woods, they got dark real quick, and them old trees started to whisper, almost like they was warning him. Shadows danced round him like they had a mind of their own. But Ethan, he just kept pushing on. Finally, he made it to the house, a sight so eerie it felt like it was frozen in time, I swear. The windows were all busted up, and them wooden planks were weathered and worn to the bone. With a deep breath, Ethan pushed open that creaking door, revealing a dimly lit interior that had an air of mystery and magic hanging 'em round like a fog. The smell of something ancient filled the air, like the wisdom of ages past, you know? And there she was, sitting all calm-like in a well-worn armchair, the so-called witch herself, Hazel. She was an old woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile that could warm the coldest heart. Her silver hair flowed down her back like a waterfall, and her frail fingers danced over that armrest like she was tracing some hidden pattern. When Ethan stepped inside, her eyes lit up with recognition, like she'd been waiting on him all along. Hazel welcomed Ethan right in, her voice having that hint of weariness mixed with deep, old-time wisdom. Surrounded by shelves packed full of dusty tomes and curious artifacts, they started talking about ancient magic and forgotten lore. Ethan found himself spellbound by Hazel's tales, her words pulling at the edges of his skepticism like a moth to a flame. Their talks stretched on into the night, filling that old house with enchantment. Hazel shared her thoughts on how all things are connected, the delicate dance between light and dark, and the real presence of true evil in this world. As their discussions deepened, Hazel revealed a truth that sent the shivers running up and down Ethan's spine, I tell you. She said, "If you go to the big old tree deep in them woods, you ain't gonna find no witch. No, you're gonna find something worse. You'll come face to face with the devil himself if you're fool enough to go looking for him." Now, Ethan, he weren't one to back down from a dare. He thought he could handle whatever the world threw at him, so he nodded and said he'd go. Hazel looked at him with those old, wise eyes, but she knew he wasn't going to be swayed. So she gave him directions, warning him one last time before he left. But his mind was made up. A few nights later, when the moon was hanging high, Ethan snuck out of his house and headed straight for that sacred tree. The woods was alive, all whispering and rustling like they knew what was coming. He found the tree just like Hazel said, a big old thing, gnarled and twisted, reaching up toward the moon. Now standing there, Ethan spoke them words Hazel had told him, some kind of old incantation, and waited. He was expecting the devil, but what showed up was worse. Something darker, more twisted than he could have ever imagined. It came crawling out of the shadows, seeping into the air around him, like it was part of the night itself. That thing, it weren't no ordinary spirit. It was pure evil, like it was born from the blackest part of hell. Ethan felt it latch onto him, like it had claimed a piece of his very soul. Weeks went by, and that thing, whatever it was, followed him, watched him. He could feel it, always just out of sight, lurking in the dark. It got so bad he finally told one of his buddies, the same one who'd dared him to go see Hazel in the first place. His friend's eyes went wide with fear when Ethan told him about the incantation and the thing that showed up. One night, his buddy agreed to go with him, to see the thing for himself. They went back to that tree, and sure enough, as they stood there, the thing appeared. Ethan's buddy took one look, and he lit out of there faster than a rabbit running from a fox, left Ethan alone with it. Days later, his friend came back to visit, shaken like a leaf. Said he couldn't sleep, couldn't stop seeing that thing watching him from the shadows. He asked Ethan if it was still following him too. Ethan just nodded, his eyes dark with the weight of it all. Ethan, feeling desperate for answers and hanging on at a glimmer of hope, figured his only shot was to head back to Hazel, the old witch who'd set him down this treacherous road in the first place. He was hoping her ancient knowing might just be the key to getting this dark force off his back. The trek back to Hazel's place weren't no easy stroll neither. His heart was pounding, filled with a mix of dread and hope. When he finally made it, that old house was just as worn down as he was, weathered and full of secrets, like they both seen their share of trouble. He knocked on the door, and after what felt like a lifetime, it creaked open, and there stood Hazel, hunched and wise, like she already knew what was weighing on his soul. Her eyes met his, and with one look, she could see the mess he'd gotten into. She let him inside, the warmth of the fire pulling away the cold that clung to him like a bad memory. They both sat down in them old armchairs, the firelight dancing across the walls, while the air hung heavy with the things left unsaid. With a deep, tired sigh, Hazel started telling Ethan the hard truth. What was following him weren't no ordinary haunt. It was a full-on demon, straight from the pits of hell itself. She explained that when Ethan went messing round at that sacred tree, reciting them incantations, he'd called forth something way darker than what he thought. That demon had sunk its claws into his very soul, looking to claim him for good. Ethan's heart sank lower with every word. He listened real close, hoping she'd tell him how to fix it, but Hazel just shook her head. She knew a lot, sure, but this here demon, it was a consequence of his own doing, and there weren't nothing she could do to send it back. It was a burden he'd have to carry, a constant reminder of the road he'd chose. In despair, Ethan asked about the others, the ones who went to the tree and never come back. Hazel nodded solemnly, telling him that when the devil himself showed up instead of the demon, them folks got dragged straight down to hell. There weren't no coming back from that. Her words sent a chill through Ethan's bones, colder than the night air outside. So, from that moment on, Ethan's life was forever tied to the watchful gaze of that malevolent presence. It followed him like a shadow, always there, reminding him of the choice he'd made and the darkness he'd called into his world. The weight of it crushed the spark he once had, leaving him a quiet, haunted version of the man he used to be. Folks in them quiet hills of eastern Kentucky still whisper his tale, passing it down through the years. A warning about a curious young man who poked his nose where it didn't belong, summoning a darkness he could never shake off. Now that the story's over, I want to hear from y'all. What do you think the lesson is here? Did you catch the message this old Kentucky tale's trying to teach? And have you ever heard something similar growing up? Maybe you've got your own spooky stories to share. Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If y'all love spine-tingling tales from deep in the heart of Kentucky, don't forget to subscribe to Kentucky Melody. We've got eerie legends, haunted hollers, and stories that'll keep you up at night. Hit that bell so you never miss a story, and remember, some things are best left untold, but we'll tell them anyway.